Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Osseo Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Welcome, everyone, to the Chasing Giants podcast brought to you by Osseo Gear. This is episode 296. We're closing in on that 300 mark, but more importantly, the cold front is here. Don, you did a video on our YouTube channel earlier this week that said this could be some of the best hunting. Let's talk about what has unfolded so far. We're recording on Thursday night, so we got the highest day of pressure tomorrow on Friday. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so last Saturday, we got rain for about 20 hours. It started midday Saturday, and then it went into Sunday morning. We got almost 3 inches of rain here where I'm at, 2.9 inches in that 20 hours. But then the temperature dropped as well. And up to that point, our temperatures had been in like the mid 80s. And it dropped to 70 and then even below. So for the next 10 days, we don't have anything much over 60 degrees. And that's where it's been here for a couple of days. But Sunday night, which would have been the first evening, after that rain had stopped and the front came through, the deer activity was absolutely unbelievable. You would have thought it was the middle of the rut. I hunted, seen a lot of deer, hunted with my son-in-law, Corey. We've seen the 2 biggest bucks that I know of on my place, as well as a lot of other deer. And then we all went to town for supper after we got, back from hunting. And on that drive, it's not uncommon to see deer, but we seen more deer than I think I've ever seen on the drive home. Probably 8 or 10 different places we saw deer. We seen a buck just crossing the wide open countryside. Another place we saw a buck chasing a doe around a field, and literally the activity was just unbelievable. And I thought it was going to be good all week, and it has been. I've been hunting mornings and evenings. I've seen deer on every hunt. Most hunts I've seen bucks on every hunt, except this evening I shot a doe a good hour before dark, and I climbed down and took care of her. Because I knew we was going to be recording this podcast. So I didn't sit till dark. I probably should have. I could have shot another doe or 2, but that's the only hunt that I haven't seen a buck because I got down an hour early. But it's just, as I look at the forecast through the end of October, we're less than 10 days from the end of October, so I can see the 10-day forecast. That temperature is not coming up above about 60 degrees as a high during the day. And, like some of the nighttime lows are in the 30s. And for October, I've seen a lot of cold fronts over the years in October, but I don't remember ever seeing one where it got cold and the front came through, and for 10 solid days, it stayed cold. And
yeah, it gets cold for 2-3 days max, and then goes right back to being hot.
Yep.
This is set in, and I don't know. We're going to actually have a special guest on the show after the Osseo segment of somebody who took advantage of this cold front, and that's our good friend Joe Chambers, who shot an absolute giant, over 200 inches. We're going to show pictures, so if you're listening on the audio platforms, you might want to hit pause and transfer over to YouTube, because we're going to show pictures of this mega giant. And it was exactly what you're talking about. He even's going to talk about using this cold front to the advantage. So we're gonna leave time to pay good respects to the story and understand his process of this property. You've walked the property yourself, but I just got one question for you. And that is, everybody's going to look at their cameras and they're going to hunt it, and they're going to say the rut is on, the rut is early. So let's just address that for everybody listening. Is the rut early, Don, or are we just seeing movement because of the weather?
Well, the rut is the same time every year, and the rut is the breeding period, Now, the pre-rut, that activity leading up to the rut, yeah, we're going to see a lot more activity than we do in typical years. And I've seen, when I was getting my doe out this evening, I was into the cover more than I typically am, and I couldn't believe the scrapes and rubs that I was seeing in there that typically I've never seen them in that location. But and I'm seeing them when I'm out checking trail cameras or whatever. I'm just seeing all kinds of activity. But I will say this, and I will stick with my statement that I've made for decades now. In October, evenings are definitely better. And even now with the cold front, yeah, I'm seeing activity in the mornings, but I'll be honest, according to my cameras and what I'm seeing, those bigger, older, mature bucks, they're done moving about daylight right now. They're moving a lot at night. The younger bucks, the middle-aged bucks, 2, 3-year-olds, yeah, there's some of that in the daylight in the morning. But if you want to kill a big one right now, I still think the time to do it's the evening. And I do think this colder weather has picked up the evening activity. And I still think right now for an older, mature buck, evening is going to be better than morning. That doesn't mean it's never going to happen in the morning. This time of year is, and under these conditions, it's way more likely than if it was hot. But evenings are still better right now. Now that's going to switch here in about another week or so.
Yeah, but just the crazy thing is that this temperature has set in. Usually, I don't see it getting warmer until maybe in November. Now, it's very likely that we get to the rut and all of a sudden it's got a heat wave like we've had a couple times, but at least for the foreseeable future, we're in really good hunting weather. For those watching on YouTube, you can see my background's a lot different. I actually relocated up here to Illinois, and this is a perfect piece to this conversation. I got up here early enough to go hunting, but check the camera, and my target buck was up walking around at 4 o'clock today. And, an hour before half hour before I was planning on getting in the stand. So I stayed out because if he's already up on his feet, I don't want to bump him. So just crazy the amount of activity. Now, this is Thursday. Tomorrow's the highest day of pressure, right? I believe.
Yes.
If I remember the forecast, Friday was the highest pressure. And then something completely different happens when that pressure drops on starting on Saturday, and that is shifting to an east wind for about 3 or 4 days. Let's talk about that weather front shifting and some kind of things to give some people some insight, because this will air on Sunday. I think that east wind stays through probably Monday, Tuesday, at least this week.
Well, east wind is my favorite wind to hunt during the rut. And part of that's the properties that I hunt lay out good for hunting easterly winds. But it seems like the deer move good with the east wind. And I don't know if it's more connected to the barometer than the wind direction or what, but I've always had really good luck with east winds. I've got a lot of good stands for east winds, but I'm looking forward to it. And I haven't hit what I would call my number one top of the line stands yet. I've held off on them just because the mature bucks aren't moving all that much in daylight yet. But it's going to be time. By the time we do our next podcast, I will have hit some of my better stands.
All right. Well, before the ASIA break and before we welcome Joe Chambers onto the show, give everybody a reminder of what you're going to be doing for the Rut Report, probably starting in about another week, I would guess.
Yeah, I'll probably start the last couple of days of October, but we'll be doing that on social media, not only mine, but Chasing Giants TV, Terry's, and Real World's social media accounts. I'm going to do a typed or written report just because a lot of guys like to read it while they're sitting in their stand where they can't really listen to it. So that seems to be the most popular version that we've had, and then there'll be a picture posted each day as something relative to whatever I'm talking about.
Yeah. All right. Sounds good. Well, we'll be right back, and after this message from ASIO Gear with Joe Chambers and his giant buck from Nebraska. We'll be right back.
ASIO Gear was forged by apex predators. Our two camo patterns are built from nature's most lethal hunters and designed to vanish anywhere in the whitetail's range. Our Raptor pattern draws inspiration from the unique feather patterns of a great horned owl, while our Rapix pattern is derived from the patterns of bobcats, coyotes, mountain lions, and wolves. But camo's just the start. Every detail of our gear is engineered for bow hunters, from our patent-pending bow hunting collar to our premium fabrics that keep you quiet, dry, and dialed in all seasons. Osseo gear is made to last, with our lifetime warranty standing behind every stitch. Visit Osseo Gear and use code CHASINGGIANTS for 15% off your first order. That's ASIOgear.com.
Well, welcome back to the show, everyone. Thanks to Osseo for their spot and continuous commitment to the Chasing Giants podcast. I was talking to Joe Miles this week, and we got a lot of really big, cool things cooking, so we can't wait to tell you guys about that as the fall progresses. But speaking of giants killed in Osseo camo, we got Joe Chambers on the podcast this week. Wait till you guys see this buck he just killed. I'm going to let Don introduce him for everyone to know. But before Don takes it, before Don even did his consulting visit to Joe Chambers' place many, many years ago. Not that many, but I knew Joe from the gun industry, knew of Joe, I should say. So his reputation preceded me ever getting to meet him through Don. And believe it or not, this is the first time we've ever seen each other's face and talked on Teams or anything like that. So I'm going to first say congratulations, Joe. What a deer. And I'll let Don introduce you now.
Thanks, Terry.
Yeah. So we are happy to have Joe Chambers from Nebraska on. Met Joe a few years back when I consulted on one of his properties, and then I returned. I don't remember if it was a year later or 2 years later, whatever it was, when he bought a new property. And I think that's how it went, didn't it, Joe?
Yep.
Yeah. So I've done a lot of consultations and become good friends with a lot of clients, and Joe has become a really special friend of mine. And I've been following his pursuit of this buck that he called Pancho for some time now. I think it was even last season. He was sending me pictures, but we got a lot of clients that shoot big deer, but there's something really special about this. And I think there's a lesson here that we can all learn from. But, first of all, Joe, welcome to the Chasing Giants podcast, and give us a rundown of this buck Pancho and tell us what he scores and all that.
Yeah. Well, thanks guys, first of all, for letting me be here with you. It's a great honor and a pleasure. I've watched you guys for years, and I enjoy the podcast. I enjoy your stance on things. So it's a wonderful thing to be on here with you. So we bought this farm in April of 23, and it had been pretty high graded, pretty hunted heavily. And when I got cameras out, I noticed that there was a pretty nice 6x7 on the farm, and he was running with a kind of a rough and tumble looking buck that had crazy points. So my youngest daughter, she and I named deer together, and she said, well, let's call him Pancho and Lefty after that Willie Nelson song. And I said, okay, that's fine with me, because the one buck that we called Lefty had a big giant hook off of his main beam and off his left side. So that's what we called him. And I hunted Lefty hard that year, and just kind of working around what I had to deal with on that farm with the farmer and the fields, and the pasture was severely overgrazed for many, many years. There was no cover to speak of. And I sent pictures to Don of that deer and talked to him about it, and some other friends of mine, and everybody kind of agreed that he was a young buck, even though he was a 6x7. And that year I found one of his sheds, and I was just elated. It measured 71 inches. Joe Johnson and Al Foster were here that spring to turkey hunt, and I got to show the shed to Joe, and he was like, oh man, that's going to be a huge deer. And I was like, awesome. And Joe loves sheds big time. So I let him walk that year in 2023, and then Don came in the winter of 24. I think it was January, and he came out with David and did a consult. And he sent me. I've got it here in front of me. I'll read just the one line from it. He sent me his review of my property. When he left the property, I said to him, Don, what do you think? This is one of the best deer hunting farms you've probably ever seen, isn't it? And he's like, oh, well, it might have potential. And that was it. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I got food, I got everything here, It might have potential. So he wrote this plan, and he wrote in here, he says, I am 90% certain that Joe will not follow this plan, at least right of way. And I read that line, and I think I called him the day I got the plan after I read that line. And I'm not going to say on video what he said to me, but I was like, dude, what are you talking about? Is this a challenge? What is going on? And he's like, I'm just saying, I know you like to wander the property. I said, well, we'll see. So we started implementing the plan, and Pancho stayed around. He was a homebody deer, and we got the cattle out of there. We planted a bunch of fruit trees, clover, standing grain, rye. We already have alfalfa there, like 40 acres of alfalfa, and just let it kind of go. And I stayed out of the sanctuary. The farm's 250 acres roughly, and 190 of it we don't go in at all except for March when we do a big shed hunt. And I'm gonna tell you, that was hard, because I do like walking the property. I do like seeing stuff. So last year, Pancho showed back up again. He was about 180, 185 inch, clean, beautiful 6x6. And I watched him. I had a chance to shoot him several times. And I sent pictures to Don and a couple other friends of mine. And they're all like, man, I think maybe he has a little bit more in him. I mean, you could shoot him and he'd be the biggest buck of your life, but he might have a little more in him. So I let him go. I didn't shoot a buck last year or the year before. And I let my daughter and my dad shoot a couple of management bucks, 4x4s that were 3 or 4 years old with little tiny short brow tines. And I let Pancho walk again. And he came out of the winter looking shabby. I mean, he was skin and bones. I sent pictures to Don. I'm like, man, I don't know if he's going to make it through winter. And I didn't find any sheds from him. We scoured my property and the neighbors both and didn't find his sheds. So I don't know where he was holed up for the winter. And then in the spring, back he came. And I knew once he showed back up in spring, I knew with the mineral supplements, the feeders that I run with the Real World Maximizer Pro Plus mineral, and the NutriCrave corn that I grow myself, I knew he was going to have the nutrition to make it through the late winter and early spring. And so yeah, it's been a long time coming. It took a absolute exorbitant amount of patience to not shoot him at 3 or 4. If that's what he is, we'll know when we get his teeth back. But not shoot him as a nice buck, a buck that everybody around here would have been proud to shoot, and let him go, trust the plan, and stay the heck out of the sanctuary. And that was the hardest part.
Well, I'll tell you why I didn't think he would follow the plan is his property is absolutely one of the most beautiful properties I've ever been on. It's not your typical Midwest property. It's rolling hills. There's some steep rock bluffs. There's an old home site. It's like probably from the 1800s. Some of the first settlers in covered wagons going across the plains probably stopped there and had a home site. There's an old windmill there, and the old stone foundation and stuff is left. And we're going through this area that I wanted to turn into the sanctuary. And I know Joe and his wife, they like to get out in the outdoors, and his daughter. And I'm just thinking, there's no way I'm going to keep these people out of this. And so I put that in the plan, and it's a lesson I learned. And that's why I want to have Joe on, because I was on a property in Kansas one time, and I've actually had this happen a couple times. This one particular Kansas property really comes to mind. And as we were walking around that property, and this was before I did looked at Joe's property a couple of years before anyway. And the client was, as we was going around this farm, he was saying, I'm going to do this here. I'm going to do this here. And, like, I'm going to clear this and I'm going to put a food plot here and I'm going to make this a cow pasture and I'm going to do this. And every time he's doing that, I'm scratching my head like, why has he got me here? He already knows what he's going to do. And so as I'm going through the day with this guy, I'm trying to come up with some kind of positive feedback to give him because he's already got a plan in mind. And then so I threw out a plan to him, and he kind of questioned the plan later. And I'm like, well, you already told me that you're going to do this here. And so I couldn't do anything with that part of the property. And you're going to do that there. I can't do anything with there. And what I've learned to do is just tune out that kind of conversation. And I even put in the notes in Joe's plan that, there might be, I said, I think that you're not going to do this, but I think I put in there, keep this plan and refer back to it later because down the road, there's probably going to be some discouragement. And then I want you to go back and do the plan. So, it doesn't matter. And the reason I wanted Joe on here is for all the listeners to hear this story is that if you're hiring a consultant, I don't care if it's one of our team or somebody not even totally associated with us. If you're hiring a consultant, don't be telling him you already got plans to do this, that, and the other thing. Now, if you're going to build a house somewhere, yeah, tell him I'm going to build a house here. But don't be saying I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Let him run with your property and let his mind go and let him come up with a plan. And then you can discuss it with him if you don't like the plan. But be totally open-minded and don't try to give him preconceived ideas of what you already want to do. Let him run with it. And the other thing is, Joe was totally dedicated. I think he was setting out to prove me wrong. That's what I really think he was doing. And
That's exactly right.
I could totally see his demeanor doing that. Joe's one of those guys that says, don't tell me I can't do something.
That's exactly right.
Well, to his credit, he followed the plan. And I mean, we stayed in contact and he had questions and I'd answer his questions. And he was dedicated to following that plan to the letter and it paid off. And that's the other thing I want people to hear. Again, it doesn't matter if you're hiring one of our group or whoever you're hiring. Whatever plan they give you, give it a chance to work. And I can tell you as a consultant, the thing that frustrates me the most is when I go to a property and I just know without a doubt in my mind, if these people will just listen and follow my plan, I know that they're going to love it because I know their hunting is going to get so much better. And most of the time they do. I'm only talking a very, very small percentage that won't follow the plan. They think it's too simple or it's too restrictive. I'm not going to be able to use X number of acres because it's sanctuary and I got to stay out or whatever reason. But, if you spend the money to hire a consultant, give them a chance and give their plan a chance. And Joe's just a perfect example of a guy that followed the plan, but he also he exceeded my expectations really because I really thought that they were going to stomp all over that place for about 4 or 5 years, and then he was going to go back and do the plan. But he jumped on it year one, and it paid off.
Let's. I want to hear if Joe, if you don't care, I'm going to put another picture of this deer up, and every couple years, one of our buddies kills a big buck like this. That it doesn't matter what angle you try to take the picture of, you're never going to do the justice to this deer. And I'm gonna be able to show some zoomed in pictures here in just a bit, but this is an awesome picture of Joe holding the buck. Joe, do you mind walking us through, just walk us through the hunt? What happened? What was the weather like? What was your decisions on hunting that day?
Yeah, so I'd hunted the farm for 3 sits prior, and all 3 times were on when we had a cold front in October. And what I would do, because of how the farm lays out, the farm as is kind of tough to hunt because there's only one access route. And in order to hunt where I need to, I have to go all the way across the alfalfa field. And that poses a problem because at night there's 70 to 80 deer on the field and you can't get back to your truck. So I just decided I would sleep in the woods. I pitched a ground blind in the deep woods and put some supplies in there. So I slept in there the first 3 hunts. I would hunt the evening and I would just crawl over in the woods and go to bed, which Don thinks is absolutely insane, but you know, you got to do what you got to do. So anyways, big cold front come in this last week and it was super windy. And my wife, I got lots of work to do. And my wife said, look, you always kill big deer when it's windy. You should go to the farm. You got the camper set up. You got your bike, all this stuff. So I said, all right, I'm going to go. So I worked Tuesday morning. We got the grain buggy cleaned out for my new batch of corn and everything. And I headed down. I got in the stand at 4:30 and I texted my wife and let her know I was in stand safe. I texted Don and my buddy Luke, who sold me the farm, and I told him, I said, I'm in the stand at the North Gap. I haven't seen Pancho on these cameras in 4 days, so I'm either right on time or I'm a day ahead. And Don texted me back, good luck with the clover leaf, like he always does, the 4-leaf clover. And Luke texted me back, he'll be there tonight early. I was like, okay, well, we'll see, you know. So I was sitting there about 6:10. I heard some squirrels chirping and I looked up in the sky. There were no birds of prey. So I was like, that's probably some deer moving around over in the pasture to my west, the sanctuary. And sure enough, here comes 2 does and 2 fawns, a buck fawn and a doe fawn. And they milled around a little bit. And the buck fawn mama, the doe of him, she didn't want to go out in the field. She smelled my ground scent and she just didn't want to go. And finally, the other doe and fawn and the buck fawn went out in the field to feed on the alfalfa, and that doe didn't have a choice. Otherwise, I was going to have to shoot her to get her out of there. And they went out and they started feeding. And then I heard something that I've heard every single time I've killed a decent buck, and that was blue jays going crazy. And I thought, there's a buck coming for sure. That happens every time to me. And so I started watching to the west in the sanctuary, and I see this big body coming. And Pancho always looked like a teenage boy fresh out of bed with his fur. Like just hair everywhere, nothing slick about him. He looked like a ragged mess. And I look over and I see him in the tall prairie grass because it's shoulder high now that we haven't grazed cattle in 2 years. And I'm like, is that him? That sure looks like him. But I couldn't see his rack. He was about 60, 70 yards away. And he came down through the draw that I'm hunting that leads up to the fence gap. And then I could see his rack. I could see his G2s that kind of kick back. And I knew immediately. So I grabbed my bow, and there's a cedar tree right in front of me that blocks the view of the deer so I can draw my bow. I drew as he got behind that cedar tree, and he looked right at me through the cedar tree. And I was like, oh man, I gotta stay still. And he stood there for a minute. Of course, I had all my Osseo gear on, my hood and everything. And Osseo gear, I mean, I know you guys are sponsored by them, but they are the best camo I've ever used. And I've used pretty much every camo on the market. And he didn't see me, and he wasn't going to wind me because the wind was in my favor out of the northwest. And he stepped into the gap. And I remember telling myself in my mind, anchor on your nose, you idiot. And I drew back tight, tensioned my back, put my string right on my nose where I anchor. When he stopped, I let it rip, and he took a step forward. And I watched the arrow hit, and I went, dang, I hit him back. And he turned. And he went back the way he had come, only this time he passed in front of the camera. Now, funny thing is, I have not gotten a daylight picture of Pancho all summer or fall. Not one. Not a single time. And he was about to give me my first daylight picture when I shot him. He was about to step in front of the camera at 6:30. And so anyways, he turned, went back up to the pasture, and I sat there and I watched him in the sanctuary right where I had first seen him, and he did not look good. He looked pretty ill. And his little buddy buck that he runs with was there with him and kind of circling him. and he turned to the west to go into the sanctuary further, and he did the drunk walk for about 10 yards, and then he did the shovel nose run, and I watched him go into this big clump of bushes. And I sat there for 20 minutes watching that clump of bushes through my binoculars, thinking, is he dead or is he coming out of there? His little buddy buck went over, walked around the bushes, and finally came down and went through the gap. And I waited till dark and left, knowing that the cavalry was already on the way to help me. And it was a short track job. He went just under 100 yards from where I shot him and fell dead right in those bushes. He weighed on the scale right at 300 pounds with full body weight. Yeah, that's actually, Terry, that's the fourth, let's see, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, that's the fourth buck that I've killed here that's 300 plus pounds. And then his gross score, Al and I scored him together last night on the phone, and his gross score was 201 and 1/8.
I'm going to put some
He's got,
zoomed in pictures here where you can explain for those people watching on YouTube. You can kind of see these pictures. You can talk a little bit about what's going on around the bases and brow tines.
yeah, so his right brow tine just exploded this year, and he's got six scoreable brow tines on the right side. And when I was showing pictures to friends before I killed him, I have a couple of close friends here that I would share pictures with, and all of them were like, he's probably 180, 185 inches. And I'm like, but look at the clump of brow tines. Like, he has a ton of brow tines. And it turns out that he has on the right side there, he has, what did it say? Let me see. He's got 15 and 3/8 inch of non-typical brow tines on that one side. And that adds a lot of inches. Right. Just a lot of inches. And then on the right side, or on the left side, he's got an inside kicker, he's got an extra short brow tine, and he's got a split G5, which is pretty dang cool. But
yeah, there's no one angle that you're ever going to take holding these antlers that's going to do this deer justice. And
no.
But I mean, it's just the and the split, what is that? The 1, 2, 3, 4, the G5, I believe. The
G5.
Split G5 out here. That is so cool. You don't see that very
Yeah.
often.
No, and if you would have told me 3 years ago when I bought this farm that I was going to kill a 200-inch buck on there, I'd have probably laughed at you, honestly. I'd have probably laughed and said, there's no way. But after having Don there and seeing, for those that don't know, this is the second farm that Don's consulted on for me. And it took me a long time to get Don to consult on a farm for me because he's busy. And he said, oh, I can have somebody else do it. And I'm like, no, look, here's the deal. In what I do, I'm extremely good in what I do. And I want the best to do things for me also. And so I want you to come. Nothing against Terry or any of the other guys. I just want you. So getting him on the first farm was a challenge. Getting him on the second farm was easy. And when I saw his plan on the second farm and his challenge to me subliminally, I was like, this all makes sense because of my surroundings, because of my neighbors. And I told myself, if you just do this, if you just follow the plan, you'll have a chance to kill a giant deer. Did I think it would happen in a year and a half from him doing the plan? No. But I'm glad it did. It's pretty exciting.
Well, this is just the first of many. That property has got a lot going for it. And the neighborhood, there's a lot of cattle and such pastures. But Joe got the cattle off of this place 2 years ago. And I haven't seen it, but I can only imagine. Because the spring I was there, the cattle had been on it, up until the fall before. So they had it ate down pretty good. But I could just see that get them cattle off there, that place is going to become the thickest place in the neighborhood. And then he's got, I don't remember how many, 20 acres of food, or was that alfalfa?
Well, there's 40 acres of alfalfa. Currently, there's 40 acres that's a mix of alfalfa and winter rye that we just planted 6 weeks ago. There's 8 acres of standing Gen 2 soybeans, real world Gen 2 soybeans, 4 acres of clover, and then two 750-pound feeders.
And
So I got food.
it's all on one corner though of the property.
Right. Yeah, it's all on the north side. Yeah.
Yeah, so those deer are all coming to one spot for all those different food sources.
Yeah.
And this isn't the last giant that's going to be shot there. I guarantee you there's going to be more.
Heidi asked me tonight, she goes, so what's the future one? What's the future big one you're going to hunt next year? And I'm like, I don't know yet, but there's
Let
a
me
couple.
Celebrate this one first. Come on.
Let's get past this taxidermy first, right? This bill first. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of potential there. But one of the things, and Don and I have talked about this, and I've hunted deer a long time. I've killed some pretty nice bucks. I'm very blessed in that. But one of the things that I didn't really fully recognize and understand before I had Don on my properties was, and I should have because of what I do for a living and where I'm at in my own career, sometimes you just need that particular professional in their field to come and point things out. And I'll never forget when we were walking that particular farm, I told Don, I said, I'd really like to hunt the east woods where the creek is. And so he goes, okay, so let's walk over there. And we walked over there and we were meandering around, and he goes, I'd put a stand in that tree right there, and I'd cut a hole in that barbed wire fence right over there. And I said, okay. We put tape on that tree. The next week we went out, we put a stand in it, we cut a hole in the barbed wire fence. And last year, I haven't set that stand this year. Last year, I watched 4 bucks that were easily in the 160 to 170 class range walk within bow range, within 25 yards of that tree while I was in it. And I'm like, this dude knows what he's talking about. He just flat does. And if you pay him or his consultants to come and do a project or do a plan on your farm and you don't do it, that's your own fault.
Well, right before you said that, I was just sitting here thinking, you're going to kill a giant on that east side.
Oh, yeah.
I like that east side as well as I do the other one because you can hunt it with a westerly wind.
Yep.
And a northwest is ideal because it's quartering into the buck's nose as he's coming into that food source, so he can smell that food source as he's coming. Yep. But those bur oaks that are along that creek on the east side, you're going to kill giants on that side.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I passed up a buck there last year when he came by, and I was pretty sure he was 4.5 when he came by, and I thought, oof, I can't believe I just let him walk by. But then I'm also, part of this whole process for me personally has been, here on my home farm, the River Farm, to get a buck to 4.5-year-old is a real challenge. If I kill a 4.5-year-old buck here on the river, that's a huge thing because of the pressure. But down there, I can let them get to 5 or 6 easy because there's no pressure. And so, when I see a 4.5-year-old 160, 170-inch deer walk by, I'm like, cool. That was great. That was neat to see him. Now, my friends all think I am absolutely bat crazy, but they're not thinking that this week when they saw the pictures of my deer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations,
another good lesson
Joe.
There is the two properties have two totally different ceilings. Your river property, you're never going to have the bucks there, and it's got nothing to do with you. It's all about the property. Every property's got a ceiling, and there is nobody on the planet that could come in and raise that ceiling from what it is. And that's something I try to get across to all clients too, is we can get your property to what the ceiling, whatever that ceiling is, we can get the property to it, but we can't go past it.
Right.
And another good lesson here is the river. That's where your ceiling is much lower. I don't like river properties or creek properties because it's nothing but continual cover for miles and miles in both directions. And those bucks will not stay home. They will run that cover. And, your other property is more isolated. It doesn't have total isolation, but it's got a lot more isolation than like a river property.
Yeah, we see bucks during the rut on the river property. So I have permission to hunt approximately, as the river flows, 4.8 miles of the river on both sides. And I get pictures of a buck on my home farm and a buck 4.5 miles north of me in the same day. And guys go, oh, they don't run that far. Yes, they do.
Yeah, they do.
Because I have pictures of them, you know. And
Yep.
but it's because of, like you said, it's because of the river, and that's really the only cover is along the river. And so they're running and hunting does.
Yep.
Well, Joe, congratulations on just a buck of a lifetime. We're really happy for you. I think we didn't tell you this, but part of the guest interview hazing is you actually have to answer Don's Higgins hot seat segment on his behalf tonight. So you
Okay.
get the question here in just a little bit.
All
But
right.
before we do, I mentioned earlier that I knew of you through the pew pew industry prior to Don, meeting you and talking about you. For those who want to learn more, we take great pride in helping friends connect the dots with people of like mindedness. So for those people who are wanting to learn more about what you do, give us the elevator speech of your business, what you do, and where people can find out more information about your business.
Sure. And thank you for that. So the company I own and operate is called Chambers Custom Pistols, and we build 1911 style pistols as well as what are commonly referred to as 2011 style pistols, which is the wide body version. Ours is called a 2019. Been doing that for professionally now for 18 years. Been very blessed in the business. I have some good friends, and I've done some really cool projects for people. You can find us on the web at chamberscustom.com or on Instagram or Facebook at Chambers Custom as well.
All right. Well, thank you. We hope that people who are into the firearm enthusiasts like I am, do yourself a favor and go learn from this guy. He's got a fantastic business, and he really sets himself apart with quality and accuracy. One of the best in the business. Like I said, I had heard of him prior to even deer hunting. So, the Higgins hot seat brought to us by 360 Blinds. I think this is going to be an interesting question. So we'll let Don smirk and smile a little bit as you stew on it. Since you have now two different plans from Don Higgins, and he's walked two different properties with you, what is the most surprising thing that he ever told you to do that was kind of off the wall, or you had no idea or even had thought about that in the past that he challenged you to do? Obviously the sanctuary thing, but off the wall, just creative that you didn't see coming. Can something come to mind?
Oh, instantly, immediately. So, like we talked about, both farms are completely different. Both plans are vastly different. On the second farm, the farm that I killed Pancho, there were a lot of things that I already knew in my mind that he was probably going to bring up. But on my river farm, when Don came and we rode around and we looked at it, I fully expected him to tell me that on the back side of it here at the home place, I was going to plant 10 acres of switchgrass with miscanthus and make a huge bedding area. That's what I was planning on. And he says, yeah, I think what you need food, because in the winter, there's none here, is there? And I'm like, no, just a pick field. And he goes, yeah, you need to turn this 10 acres into food, all of it. And I was like, really? And he goes, yeah, like, just forget the switchgrass. We did a little switchgrass strip with some miscanthus on the other side of the river, but he says, no. He says, this needs to be food. And so that was a huge struggle for me, not because of the decision to do it, because it was already ag, but I can be pretty impatient about certain things. And I'm going to tell you guys something. And I've talked to Don about this. He knows my feelings on it. Clover is the most frustrating thing for me to grow. Like, beans are a close second, but clover's terrible because I planted it and then we were in a drought year and I saw nothing. And I would send pictures to Don and I was like, dude, this looks terrible. Are you sure I'm doing the right thing? And he's like, trust the process, Joe. Have some patience. 6 months go by. I send him pictures. I'm like, this still looks terrible. Trust the process, Joe. Just trust it. A year later, 2 years later, 2.5 years later, it still looks terrible. He's like, just trust the process. Okay, I'm trusting, but I'm having a hard time believing right now in this clover. This year, the clover's like 2 feet tall. I can't even keep control of it. It looks beautiful. The deer love it. And Don was right again. So yeah, that was the biggest surprise to me was we're going to do 10 acres of food and not cover, because I was pretty certain where his head was going to be was cover on the river farm.
One of the most it's interesting that you said that, and I don't want to get down a huge rabbit hole because well, maybe I do, I don't know. But one of the most frustrating things I see with consulting clients is we put a plan together that, like what you just said, we're changing the whole feed program with crops, whether it's beans or corn or clover, like you just said, and there's a drought year. And the client is just so impatient after that 1 year. This is never going to work.
Yep.
It's like, I get it. We had some bad luck with weather and it didn't work out year one, but trust me, if you just buy into it over the long haul, it's going to work. I think you saw a little bit of that yourself. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I actually, not to belabor the point, but I actually had a conversation with Jack Houston today. He's going to come fly my place in March after deer season, because we can't fly drones here in Nebraska during deer season. And we were talking about it, and he says, well, do you have any other hobbies? I says, yeah, my daughters. That's it. Like, I used to shoot rifles competitively. I shot pistols competitively. I fished, all this other stuff. I don't have any hobbies anymore except deer hunting and my daughters and my wife. That's it. Because it's not cheap. It's time consuming, but at the end, you've got to pick something in life that you really love. And I love whitetail deer. I mean, that farm where I killed Pancho, in the past 12 months, I have fed, I'm giving away a secret here, but I've fed 15,000 pounds of feed on that farm. And do I care? Not one bit. I mean, I grew my own NutriCrave corn just to do it. So, is it a sacrifice? Yeah, absolutely. It's a sacrifice, because I gave up everything else that I enjoyed doing in order to chase one dream. And then one day you wake up and here you are. And it's a great blessing.
Well, we appreciate you being on the show. It's an awesome story. We're really happy for you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. It's like I said, it's an honor.
Well, thank you, Joe, and congrats again.
Thanks, sir. I wouldn't have been able to do it without you, Don. I mean that.
Well, I just pointed you in the right direction. You did all the work.
Yeah, but you got to have the direction, my friend. And that's what I want people to pull out of this is, get the direction and go follow the plan. It works.
Well, thank you.
All right. Well, we'll be right back with some listener submitted questions brought to us by Midwest Land Group.
Does your real estate agent know the difference between a rub and a scrape? Or did they ask how many deer you caught this year? At Midwest Land Group, our agents evaluate the land the way serious hunters do, because it's exactly who we are. From surveys, soil types, floodplains and easements, to timber quality, tree stands, access, and food plots. Whether you're interested in buying or selling, work with an agent who speaks your language. Visit MidwestLandGroup.com to connect with one today. Midwest Land Group. Buyers, sellers, land. Connected.
All right, our first question comes from Eli Doyle from Lewistown, Illinois. It says, hello, Don and Terry. After Don's podcast on Hunter, I've listened to every episode. My question stems from their show. You guys always preach wind direction. Recently they said wind doesn't matter nearly as much as the thermals do. I would like your opinion on the claim that wind doesn't matter nearly as much as thermals. I've heard of people hunting based on barometric pressure, but never thermals over wind direction. Sorry for the long-winded question, but looking for your guys' input. Have a great and successful season, and God bless. Well, Eli, thermals are a much bigger factor in hilly or mountainous type terrain than they are flatland. And these guys, I know they're hunting Pennsylvania and Ohio. I know they got property in Ohio, and where it's a whole lot rougher than where it is on the flatland where I'm at in the farm country. So thermals. I've described it as smoke countless times on the podcast, where somebody's burning leaves, and one day the smoke is just going straight up from that burning pile of leaves. And another day they're burning leaves and that smoke just kind of hangs to the ground. And that's thermals. So if you've got rising thermals and you've got a deer downwind of you, the thermals are going to carry your scent right over his back. And a lot of times you hear somebody say, well, I know my scent control regiment works, whatever it may be, because I've had deer downwind of me and they didn't smell me. Well, thermals might have been taking that scent right over the top of those deer. And so there was no way they weren't in your scent stream. And thermals are important, but they are more important in hillier terrain because, if you're on the side of a mountain, for example, and the thermals are rising, well, the deer above you can smell you, where the deer below you are not going to be able to. So there's some validity to what they're saying, but you got to kind of take it all into context and consider the terrain where you're hunting.
Yeah, we were just talking about this before we got on air. Tomorrow, we're trying to figure out a plan for where I'm going to hunt, and we have a 1 mile an hour wind tomorrow. So the thermals are going to play a whole lot more important than the direction of that 1 mile an hour wind. So, it's different than when you got a 14 mile an hour wind and you're blowing into your bedding cover versus 1 mile an hour and you got rising or sinking thermals. So, yeah, where I'm from in Kentucky, Ohio, Pennsylvania, where the guys from Hunter are at, I know they hunt all over the place though. Much bigger factor than when you're on a pancake like out by your house. You got a little bit of topography, but not much.
Right.
All right, well, let's try to get one more question in here. This is a longer one, so we'll try to get it knocked out.
This one comes from Drew Harmon from Floyd, Virginia. It says, Dear Don, I remember you talking several times on the podcast about you had gone several seasons without shooting a big buck. You even said you had probably gone more seasons without filling a tag than most of these viewers. My question is, during that time, what did you do to avoid getting discouraged and depressed and to keep your eyes on your goals? I feel like most serious deer hunters all want to shoot big deer every year, and that's why we put in so much work and effort in the off season. But very few have the dedication and patience to wait on a 5.5 or 6.5 truly. I myself have changed my goals over the last couple of years and have become more disciplined to stay on these older bucks, even if it means not getting an opportunity. I feel like in the long run, it'll just make me a better hunter. Also, can you tell us what fixed blade broadheads you like to use? Thanks for all you and Terry do. This is truly the best podcast on YouTube, and you have taken my deer management to a whole new level. Thanks and God bless. Drew, as far as broadhead, I'm currently shooting a Slick Trick 125 grain, the Slick Trick Magnum, which is 1 1/8 inch cutting diameter.
It's a 4-blade, right?
4-blade, yep. But there's a lot of good broadheads out there, so I'm not going to plug one over the other because there's just a lot of good ones. In regards to your question about, how to stay motivated when it's difficult to reach your current goal, whatever it is. And for me, I think it was just my mindset. I was never content just shooting deer. It was always a challenge to get better, and it was always a challenge to go after the biggest bucks I could find. And it wasn't, most of that time, it wasn't one specific buck. It was like a certain class of bucks. And I think, to be honest, I think some people have a much easier time with it than others just based on their mindset. Not filling a tag didn't bother me, and to be honest, it still don't to this day, or bothers me very, very little. Not trying to impress somebody else, but I can tell you back in the day when I would go without shooting a deer, and probably, back when I had a factory job, I worked that for 20 years, started it when I was 18 years old, and I got out of there when I was 39. So about 20 and a half years. And I would take my vacation in November for the rut every year. And I would say about half of the time or more, I would come back to work after being off for a month and had not shot a deer. And boy, did I ever hear about it from my coworkers. Man, you was off work a month and you didn't kill a deer. What's wrong with you? And just let it roll off. And next year, I probably didn't kill one either. And I think, I was only I wasn't trying to impress anybody. I was trying to get better and way more proficient at killing mature deer. And that was way more important to me than trying to impress somebody else. And I know there's people that aren't trying to impress anybody, but they still want to shoot a deer every year. I totally get it. I think today, most deer herds are different than they were back when I was younger. And I think a guy today could shoot plenty of does. If he wants to shoot some deer, wants some venison, forget the little buck, shoot does. Do your part to manage the herd, and you're still shooting deer. Yeah, they don't have antlers on their head, but it keeps you in the woods. You're not burning your buck tag, so you continue to get better at what you do. And that's about the best advice I can offer for that question.
I don't want to get down a rabbit hole on this, but I think as more guys are getting into serious setting goals and trying to stick to it, I think, at least in my network of friends, there's less of us shooting does than we did 10 years ago. We used to shoot a lot more does than we do today, and it shows. I hunted Tuesday night and saw 32 does, and I think 28 on Wednesday night at home. And I mean, it's just way too many. I mean, I've personally been guilty of that. You're so strict on your management and trying to achieve your goal of the buck tag that either you're too worried about shooting a doe and putting intrusion on, or you don't want to ruin your hunt and shooting a doe. And personally, I think we've probably fallen by the wayside a little bit in our doe management. At least I have.
Yeah, and I think that's the case everywhere. So, controlling the doe population is part of managing the property. So, no reason not to be shooting those does.
Yeah. All right, let's try to do one more. Let's get it in there. We cut it short last week. Don't want to do it too much this week.
Okay, this one comes from Jeremy Randolph from Pulaski, Tennessee. He says, Don, you've been around the hunting industry a long time. If you could go back in time and give your 20-year-old self advice about the industry, what would it be? I'm hoping to get into the hunting industry in some capacity, and any advice you have would be appreciated. Also, what do you think is the biggest problem with the deer hunting world today? Terry, do you have any business advice for someone wanting to get into the hunting industry? You have a good bit of knowledge in this area. Thanks, guys. Oh, if I could go back my 20-year-old self, I'd probably, I'm pretty outspoken and opinionated about a lot of things, and it's probably cost me some opportunities, but at the same time, I don't think I would ever change that. I am who I am, and I think that the fact that I'm willing to stand on certain issues and take a stand on certain issues has also, attracted some followers as well, people that are also, in tune to politics or whatever it might be. I would say that probably my biggest regret in the whole hunting career, if you will, is some of the people that I hooked up with. I try to see the good in everybody. And I think and I'm not speaking of any one particular person. I can think of 3 or 4 people that I really wish I'd have never met. And the crazy thing about that is
the list is long but not very distinguished. Is that the term that people use?
It's not even really not distinguished. It's not very long either, really. There's just a small handful of people, And the crazy thing is that friends warn me about these particular people. Good, trusted friends. I want to see the good in everybody, and I'm kind of naive, I guess. Terry has warned me about people, and he doesn't say I told you so, but you can I can tell that he knows he told me so on a couple of different people. But I think you just got to be careful who you hook up with, and um, follow your gut. I mean, I want to follow my heart instead of my head. You know, my brain's telling me that this is no good, and my heart's telling me, oh, give him a chance. I kind of soft-hearted towards people, so I guess that would be my big one there. What was this? There was a second question there too, wasn't there?
What's the biggest problem in the industry?
Biggest problem in the industry. You know, I was sitting in my tree stand thinking the other day. I was thinking about making a video really about what I see as the top 3 issues, and not just the industry, but the hunting community. And I think I'll just go through all 3 of them real quick. I think number 3 would be egos. I think there's some big egos out there, and you know, people don't understand that their opinion is more important to them than it is anyone else. And you get on social media and you see that, and I'm probably a little bit guilty of that myself. Number 2, real quick, I would say social media. Social media is just giving everyone a voice, and good grief. I mean, I catch more grief in one day on social media than I've ever caught in my life in person. And that's not an exaggeration. I've sat in the booths at many deer shows and have yet to have the first jerk come up and mouth off to me. But you get on the internet and you got to deal with a dozen of them a day. So I think social media is a big problem today. But you know what I think is number 1 is jealousy. And people want to say it's ego. No, it's not ego. It's people jealous of other people. And, you know, I'll give you a perfect example. Joe Chambers and his buck. I knew when I posted pictures of his buck on social media, there was going to be people say, no way it scores 200 inches. And, you know, how do they know? There's no angle of that buck that shows every time. And I was looking as he was talking at the pictures that he was putting up on the screen, Terry. That buck has 20 total points, and there was no angle that showed more than 15 points. Because I was counting as the picture was up there. I could count 15, but I could never count 20.
15 inches of non-typical antler off of one brow tine.
Yeah. But yet somebody has got to comment that deer doesn't score 200 inches. And why would they do that? Why would it mean so much to them? It's about jealousy. They got to bring him down, or try to attempt to bring him down, because they didn't kill a buck like that. And you just see it, you know, time after time on social media. So you throw all 3 together. You throw a big ego, social media, and jealousy all together, and you got a recipe for just continual turmoil. And there's, you know, social media has made me a lot of money through business, but I almost wish it never existed.
Yeah. Jeremy asked a question about advice to get into the industry, and I don't know how he wants to get into the industry. If it's to make a product or have a service, don't commoditize what's already there. Find a new niche, find a new product. And then from there, you decide if you want to grow it, develop it, or get it to the point you sell it off to one of the conglomerates. So let's say you make a new broadhead. You might want to make a whole family of broadheads and make it your own brand, or you might want to patent it and then sell the rights to a conglomerate, cash out and go do something different. Both styles are very popular in this industry. There's about 4 conglomerates that pretty much buy everything up, that try to at least. If you're wanting to get onto it as like a hunt on TV style thing, send me a private message. We can talk to you about Chasing Giants TV. We got a bunch of friends and followers that can submit footage on there if they want. we'll see what happens. But surround yourself with good people that align with your values, and don't try to be somebody you're not. If you get on there and try to pretend that you're somebody you're not, people's going to see through it. Partner with people, be loyal to them. Hopefully those companies will be loyal back. But it's all about relationships and doing things the right way, buddy.
Great advice.
Well, I'm so happy for Joe, and that huge buck. I mean, what a I don't know. He's such a funny dude. I haven't gotten to spend anywhere close to the amount of time that you have with him, but he's a funny dude. Don't tell me I can't do something. That's hilarious.
Well, I really didn't know it was going to have that impact, or maybe I need to do that to more clients. But he is a great guy, heart of gold, got his priorities in order, loves his family more than anything, and money, business, whatever is way down the line. Didn't know till tonight that he was once a pastor, a youth minister.
Yeah.
So I shouldn't be surprised, because his integrity is right there, with the Christian values that you and I try to promote. So shouldn't be surprised at all. But great dude.
Well, make sure you're checking out Chasing Giants TV YouTube channel. We got some hunts that have been released and going to be released this week. We got the Rut Report coming on all of our social media platforms. Make sure you check that out. And Daniel Pfeiffer has Sunday Night Prayer Time this week. So I think that's a wrap on this show, buddy.
God bless everyone. Get to the woods this week, and we'll see you back here.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by Osseo Camo. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Sunday Night Prayer Time, and it's an exciting time of year. I'm recording this on October 24th. It was a beautiful frosty morning this morning, and it was one of those mornings that we all dream about as deer hunters. And we're heading into November with excitement high, and these are the times we live for. And I feel like the Lord's laid my heart to talk a little bit about identity. I don't know about you guys, but I very much find hunting at times to be a part of my identity, and sometimes an obsession. And at some point we cross from passion to obsession, maybe even to have it as an idol at some point. The truth is, for me, this hunting passion probably originally came from hunting being an escape. I'll spare you the details, but growing up, it was chaotic. It was a lot of things that I would say just not like the most exciting situation. And so I went to the woods to disappear. It was quiet. It was safe. There was no drama. And it didn't take long, but the love of hunting, so too much of a good thing at some point became a bad thing. And hunting became where I found my worth. And so I think this came to a peak last year when I found a specific buck, a nicknamed Shocker. And, I didn't have these years of trail cameras, but for whatever reason, he went from, not calling our place home to all of a sudden that, he was there like 4 or 5 nights a week. And it was unreal. It was one of the craziest chases I've ever been a part of. And that's exciting, except for I let that thing consume me. It's just a deer, and I'd never admit it then, but I can now, that I let the idea of harvesting that deer define me. I feel most alive during hunting season. And, when it ends, I'm sure we all feel a little bit of a sadness, but when that one ended, it was a weird lost identity. The fact that it didn't work out the way that I hoped, I felt lost. I love chasing goals. I love hitting goals. I feel like I hit a lot of the goals I set, but couldn't hit that one. And so Wes actually spoke on this maybe mid-November of last year. And that's kind of what it started to unravel a little bit for me. And God started kind of breaking down my heart. He spoke to, our identity, just like we're talking about tonight, is in Christ, that it's just a deer, right? And so, despite hearing that, somewhere around February, March, I started chasing harder. I cannot remember a year where a deer had taken up as much mind space that it did, but I set different stands, I knocked on different doors, I set trail cameras all over the place. I normally don't run them in summers, but I was putting them all over the place in summers. And at the end of the day, that chase had become my identity. And so today I can tell you, absolutely, I let it define me. And was in a prayer session called a Wellspring session, and this was pretty recent here, and this is where I felt like God really spoke through. There was a pause when I really couldn't answer well without hunting, your family, without your past. Like, who are you? And to be honest with you, I should. The Bible school answer we would know, but I didn't know, right? I had gotten so used to carrying the pressure, the chasing the goals, pushing forward, carrying my past, whatever you guys, maybe, we have those things too. But in that moment of silence, I really feel like the Holy Spirit spoke to me, and your identity is not achieved, it's received. And I'm sure, like many of you, many of us in general, we've spent years trying to earn an identity through success, through work, through being strong, whatever, right? Through hunting, being a big buck killer, whatever. But the promise is when we know Christ, our identity doesn't come from what we accomplish. It comes from who you belong to. And for me, it was such a freeing truth. It seems like it should be so simple, but it was so freeing. And so I go back to Galatians 2:20, which is, it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. Right? And it's not what I've done, and I'm not my wins, I'm not my failures. We are not our past. We are a son and a child of God. We are free, we are forgiven, we are chosen, we are loved, we are seen by our Father. Not because we earned it, but because Jesus said we were worth dying for. Now, don't get me wrong, guys. I'm still going to go out there. I'm still going to hunt hard. I still love the outdoors that God's created for us. And I just don't, this year's already been more fun. I went back to the basics and having more fun and, kind of letting go of the results, but going out there and saying, God, you've got it. And I don't really hunt to find myself anymore, to prove something, but to enjoy it. And if you're listening to this and maybe either A, you feel lost, or maybe you have also been chasing your worth and success, or money, or even good things like family and work. In the midst of that, you may not know who you are without those things, but heaven's already called you by name. So I hope God can speak through that. I hope God uses this to speak to someone out there. Anything that is of me, I truly do hope it falls away. Thanks for letting and me to be able to share this with you guys. As we get into the thickness of hunting season, y'all, my prayer is to be safe, to have fun, but always to know whose you are. So I'm going to end us in a quick prayer. Father, we come to you in reverence and thank you for the grace that we truly do not deserve. Help us, Lord, to be reminded of your worth. Help us to be reminded that our identity is found in you. Father God, I pray tonight for anyone who's been carrying whether it be a false identity, maybe it's an idol, maybe they're chasing their worth in all the wrong places. And remind them whose they are. God, we thank you that we are yours. God, help us to remember that you speak truth, and that you call us son, you call us daughter, you call us mine. God, keep us all safe. Help us to be good stewards of the land and to enjoy your creation this fall. In Jesus' name we love you. Amen.